Matt Johnson here, another episode of Deck Talk. We are now in the heat of the summer. Last episode we talked about some different patterns for summer techniques, targeting deep water fish, weed lines, some of the things you want to focus in on as you venture out on the main lake structure. There's a section of fishing here in the summer season that I like to call shoreline, targeting shoreline. So this is going to be shoreline success. What do you look at shoreline fishing in terms of finding the right structure to catch fish, namely bass? Of course, you panfish anglers are going to find the same type of structure for your big bluegills. So there's shoreline features and characteristics that you want to focus in on if you're going to have shoreline success. I know it's obvious, a lot of bass fishermen target docks. Bass fishermen target shallow wood and fallen trees and those sorts of things. Very important. They're going to hold fish even in these summer months when things get hot and the sun gets high. What I'm going to encourage you to focus in on, that we're kind of targets in some of this episode today, is some of the shallow weed types. Looking at the shoreline structure itself to determine what's going to be out from the shoreline that might hold fish. Are there rock on the shoreline? Generally there might be some rock out deeper, as long as some of it's not necessarily man-made. Look at some sandy beaches. You're probably going to have a softer sandy beach out from the shoreline. Look at very heavy bluffs, cover, all those sorts of things, lily pads. You're probably going to have more of a mucky shoreline out from the edge. So those are some of the things you want to key in on as you target shoreline fishing here this time of year as we get into the summer months, or really any time of year. But some things we're going to focus on are the weed types that are next to the shoreline, how to fish them and approach them effectively. Some of those sorts of things you want to key in on, some of the bait types to use. And then again, we'll touch on last year's topic of dock fishing and reiterate some of the key characteristics of hitting docks from the right angles and the right perspective so you can get bit every time. So let's move on here and catch some fish. But I guess before we move in there, I'll show you a couple bait options that I'm going to be throwing. There's three main types that I'm going to be pitching here on these shoreline areas where, and again, we're targeting depths of 5 feet or less generally, sometimes even 1, 2, 3 feet of water. So as long as you have the right characteristics and the elements on these shorelines, you can fish these shallow water in days like today where it's going to probably hit 90 degrees, and we started the morning here at 6:30 with 78 to 80 degree water temps. So these shallow spots will hold fish even in the heat of the summer. So let's look at some lure and bait presentation options here. For starters, I throw a lot of wacky rig presentations. Now this happens to be the Mr. Twister Cometa. It's your soft plastic stick bait. I'll hold it up to the camera there. And very enticing. And I use about a 1 or 2 aught hook, but I'm a little different than the average person, and I'm sharing a secret here that some people might get upset at because a lot of people aren't doing it. This is a forged tarpon hook that you find in most fly departments. They're the fly angler there at Thorn Brothers, the fly angler in Blaine, Minnesota. I buy these hooks there, and you can see it there. If I get it close enough there on the camera, it's a forged hook, very stout, very durable, small in profile, has a little bit of weight, so again, you're not looking to get too heavy when you're skipping docks or hitting shallow areas with this weightless worm. It's actually a weighted worm, but no weight attached, I mean. And all I'm doing is just wacky rigging, hooking right through the middle there and bouncing along, but this hook is so sharp, so effective. I seem to have much better hooking percentage with the smaller profile than a lot of other options out there. Some guys use just worm hooks and then wacky rig them and skip the shorelines. I guess it's whatever you have confidence in is important, but I'm fishing one of these smaller hooks, 1 or 2 aught, and again I'm going, it's a tarpon hook. You find it in Gamakatsu. This happens to be the Gamakatsu brand, but Umpqua makes one. There's a couple other brands out there that make a really good forged tarpon hook here that doesn't bend out and is very durable. Case in point though, with this style of hook, if you're using braid like I am when I'm throwing around these shallow areas, you hook a chunk of wood, you got to go in and get it because it's not going to bend out, it's not coming out because of how tough this hook is. And you can see here I'm using that yellow Power Pro on this. Big reason is that I like to see, if I'm fishing very thick, heavy vegetation, I'm not as worried about my line color, but I can see it, especially if I get some windy days that are blowing in and I'm going to do the dead stick approach. I can see that line twitch across the surface, and I don't have to worry as much on feel to see the bite. So I have a setup here. This is just this is a 6.5 foot Thorn Brothers custom rod that happens to be about a heavy action. It's pretty stout, so I can horse these fish out of the shell cover. And I got a 3000 series Shimano Stratic on there, like I said, with that 30-pound yellow Power Pro. Seems to work pretty well. So you can match that up with really any color line. And I like to do braid. You could do fluorocarbon, it's entirely up to you, but I like the braid, the no stretch, the powerful hook sets, and the oomph to get them out of that shallow slop. So that wacky rig system, very effective whether you're going to skip a dock or fish the area in between the docks. Doesn't really matter, it works for all applications here when we're fishing shoreline structure. Great for skipping underneath trees too. So very, very effective. Another option, tailoring off pretty much that same bait. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just Texas rigging. You can see there, I'm just Texas rigging that same bait, that Cometa, so it's a weedless approach. So if I'm going to throw it along lily pads or an extremely thick cover where the exposed wacky rig system might not be the best idea, I'll throw a Texas rig and I'll get the kind of similar fall action, a little more erratic as far as when I jerk it. Looks more like a jerk bait, where that wacky rig's just kind of fall and then kind of pulse as you hit it. So this will be a little more effective. It still skips very well under docks and it's great in any type of cover. So this is probably going to be one of your most versatile presentations. Any cover you hit along a shoreline, you probably can fish this just fine. Reeds, it doesn't matter what you're doing. And I couple that again with usually 20 or 30 pound braid. I'm using just a straight green Power Pro on this setup. And I got a Shimano Chronarch reel, and then I got an 844 G Loomis rod, so it's a heavy action rod. Again, you want the oomph power to get them out of that shallow cover. It is a 7'2" option, so I can get a little more castability if I want to cast over the lily pads or hit some of these pockets, and it seems to work very effective. So that's another piggyback option from the wacky rig. These two setups will basically get you in any sort of cover you want as you're fishing shallow water. And again, like I said, the size of the hook is usually a 3 to 5/0, again, depending on what you're doing. This happens to be a 4-inch Cometa because I bit an inch off to get a smaller profile, and I got it rigged in the 3/0 worm hook. I typically start with a 5/0 worm hook and the full 5-inch Cometa and then go from there. But I know how this bite's been on some of these spots, and I've downsized and I've got better hooking percentage. So again, you can manipulate your plastics to get the desired results. So very effective option there too. Last on my list of go-tos here in this shallow cover would be your standard jig, jig and pig, all those sorts of things. You know, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, depending on what you're doing. Fishing a lake like Minnetonka where you're covering a lot of milfoil, I might go to a heavier jig so I can punch through some of that sloppy stuff. Same thing with the lily pads. I like a very tough weed guard there. This happens to be the Flame and Lures Ultimate Jig. Very effective. I've been using this style jig for a long time from this company. Dave makes a great product at Flame and Lures there. And again, color, again, I'm not big on color. Just try to match it. This is just basically a blue and kind of a green pumpkin watermelon there. I do put a creature bait on the end. You can see it's got flippers and everything. You want that big profile so it covers and slaps the water and really gives off a big presentation and profile and action in the water. Again, that flip also slows down a little bit if you're going to throw into a couple feet of water. I do like rattles. You can hear that. I do like rattles on these, very effective. So this is going to allow you to flip into the really thick, heavy stuff, flip around docks. A great third option to hit shallow water, and you can pretty much cover anything you want with these three options. I'm usually throwing 40-pound braid on something like this. You could do 30. I know guys that do 20. I'm usually 30, 40. Some guys even do 50 or 65 if they're going to flip very heavy cover. But I got 40-pound new Super Slick Power Pro on here in that timber color. Very good. I've had very good positive success with this line. And I'm coupling that with a Shimano Chronarch, that new E-Set 200 E7. You know, very nice. It is a 7-to-1 gear ratio, so if I need to, I can get back to the boat fast. I generally fish this presentation slow, so I'm not cranking a whole lot. And then I got it matched up on one of those new 844 G Loomis NRX rods in that beautiful green color there. You can see very slick looking rod, and very powerful, very lightweight, and very sensitive. So if I'm looking for that bite to detect the lightest bites, that NRX rod from G Loomis is pretty tough to beat. So between these three setups, you can pretty much cover any shoreline structure you want to fish. Everything from the nastiest slop to the open water to maybe a more erratic presentation to something very soft and subtle, dead stick in that wacky rig. So very effective with those three setups. Again, you can just hit a shoreline and just go. It's a matter of what rod you're going to pick up at what time. So let's head in there and see if we can catch some fish and get some of these bites to go and see what happens. Here's a prime example of a shoreline that has multiple elements. You see it's got lily pads off here to our left. You got an open spot here where maybe a landowner cleared some stuff out where bass can kind of sit, and you got various weed types. Then you got a very nice dock impoundment there that's right out from some deeper water. The boat is actually positioned at 10 to 12 feet, and you can see these fish will oftentimes slide up onto these pieces of cover. You know, very expansive lily pad field here to your left. Lots of cover, lots of forage, no matter whether the sun's high or whatever might be going on. It's a very effective piece of structure to fish. You can flip stuff into it. You could even throw a frog into that, but either the jig or the Texas rig Cometa we show will be excellent options. And then I move right down with that wacky rig and fish some of this open water, and then skip these dock pilings to see if we can get something to bite. Again, you can see as you move in over down there, you can see there's another pocket behind the weeds that's open, and that's where you want to have that distance cast so you can get on those areas and be very effective. Here's another prime example of a spot you definitely want to hit. You can see there, as we zoom in, you can see behind this set of lily pads, there's a nice open pocket right there with different types of structure. You got rocky shorelines, you have weeds nearby, you have deep water elf and lily pads, you have basically a pocket that can be shadowed and from even the hot sun, and fish will hold them there at different times. So definitely hit a spot like that as we move into these areas. Those are other areas you definitely want to key on and focus on some of the shoreline structure. Here's another weed type that I definitely focus in on as you hit these shoreline spots. As I zoom in, you'll see it's kind of a matted, sloppy weed down there. But you can see there's pockets all over throughout this area here. It's a relatively expansive spot, and you can see it's going to hold all sorts of shade and cover. And again, just like back in the lily pads, you have spots behind it that are very effective, shallow, spots that can provide a lot of shade for fish, so even if it's hot, it's comfortable. But again, you can see there's mats of stuff, and then in between these mats, there's pockets. And that's where I might skip a wacky rig over the top, that Texas rig Cometa, flip a jig in there. And again, you're only thrown into a few feet of water here, but it will hold fish because the fish will have comfort. You know, they're in their comfort zone here. And then as you move down the row, again, you'll see more rock, more shoreline, another set of docks here, overhanging canopies, all kinds of spots that could hold fish as you move down the row. So the key here is that a lot of anglers, especially bass fishermen, target the docks and they go really fast over these areas in between. But for me lately, you can see even here at 7:30 in the morning, there's some shade right inside there. I'd be skipping those areas and focus on some of those spots. So don't overlook these spots in between docks, especially ones that look like this with matted weeds. I know anglers sometimes like to avoid the weeds, but I would advise you to get in them and hit those spots that you see there right behind there, as well as the pockets in between these weeds. So next time you hit the water, definitely get out there and hit some of these spots. In that shallow cover there, as you can see behind me, we got basically a field of shallow, sloppy mat we just showed you a picture of. And this one came out and grabbed that wacky rig Cometa. See there, wacky rig. Cometa did the trick. Nice and fat. Again, like I was just reiterating here, I just showed you that picture of the shallow structure here that we're fishing. It's just kind of the matty, nasty weed. I'm just fishing that wacky rig Cometa. Pretty subtle, fishing it slow, and it came on and grabbed it in those weeds. Again, off from the docks. There's no docks around me, so where there's docks in the area, again, it's a spot in between where the docks are. So key in on some of those spots and don't forget to hit those as you move through these spots, for sure. Here's one of the shallow stuff. Switch to that Texas rigged Cometa. Again, throwing these sloppy areas in between where the docks are. Got one to eat it. Get him up here for the camera. Oh. Another nice fat bass. Healthy little fish. Again, like I just mentioned, switched over, was fishing the wacky rig. Got into a little more thick cover, and I switched over to that Texas rig Cometa there to get these fish to bite. So again, it's all about being versatile as you fish these spots and which bait you're going to throw. And that's the key. This spot I just caught this fish on is often overlooked. This is a popular lake I'm fishing, and I see a lot of anglers go right by it. They hit the dock, skip the 40 yards I just caught that fish on, and hit the next dock. So if you take a little extra time and focus in on some of these spots in between, even on tough days, no matter the conditions, you can get bit and catch a few fish. So very important tip there to keep an eye on it, and give it a shot in the lakes near you and see if they work. Build some confidence in this pattern so that when you go to new lakes or try something different, you have a little more faith in it. So remember, as we key in on these shallow areas to get this shallow water success, you want to focus on spots in between the docks. Hit the entire shoreline, analyze the spots, look at the weed types, look at what the shoreline is presenting. Are there rock? Is there rubble? How much shade? How much overhang? Is it going to be soft? Is it going to be hard? You know, attack it with the right approach as far as the technique goes, as far as the lure that you're using, and you know, just be aggressive. You know, don't fall victim. Get out there for a day. Force yourself to fish the spots in between the docks. Look for those matted weeds and look for those pockets and make each cast count. Be precise, practice precision casting. Be spot specific on where you cast. Don't just blanket a shoreline and cast at everything you see. Look for those pockets. Look for maybe a difference in weed type. Look for something like that. And maybe fish it a little more effectively and quicker over where the sloppy stuff is, especially if you're going to fish something wacky rigged. It helps you avoid the tangles, because as you can see again with this bait, it does have an exposed hook, so if you fish that through the thickest cover, you're going to get bit. That's where you might want to go to that Texas rig cometa like we showed you earlier to get these fish to bite. You know, you saw where that one fish came from. It was basically on a spot similar to what I showed you in the camera seconds before I caught it. It's just basically an inside spot between a set of docks that has matted, sloppy stuff. I see a lot of anglers just kind of put the trolling motor on high and zip by those to get to the next dock. Even when it's sunny, it doesn't matter. The last several days, even a week here or so, we've been catching a lot of fish in that pattern. There have been fish on docks, don't kid yourself, but the dock fishing really it's nothing special, and it's either hit or miss. The stuff we've been targeting here in between the docks has actually proved to be a pattern. And fishing with something in this three-part system, whether you're throwing a wacky rig cometa, a Texas rig cometa, or a jig, one of those three options has worked very well. I've also seen, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of guys throwing frogs and catching some fish inside this nasty slop. So keep an open mind about it, and be aggressive on the spots you fish, but be very spot specific in turn there. So, you know, thanks for watching here. As we move into the summer months, we'll continue to hit on some of these patterns and hopefully get you more fish in the boat when it's hot, when it's uncomfortable, oftentimes even unbearable here with some 90-degree weather they're predicting. But hopefully we can get you on the right path here to hit some techniques and species specific. Last episode we talked about summer patterns, really focusing on deep water structure, some of the baits you present. Now we flip the switch here and hit some of the shallower stuff. So in order to be successful shallow water, like I said, the three-part system, focusing on what you're targeting. Not all shorelines are equal, and have fun with it. Get a lake map, find some spots that look successful. Oftentimes they're next to deep water, so right behind us, the front of the boat here, the back of the boat is facing the shallow water. The front of the boat here is in 11 feet of water. The back of the boat is darn near touching the thick matted weeds. So the deeper water nearby is very, very important, especially when things get hot and humid. So hit some of those techniques, hit some of those tips. Hopefully they help you catch some fish here the next time you hit the water. Otherwise, we'll catch you here in the next episode of Deck Talk. This is Matt Johnson. Thanks for watching.